God bless everybody one more time. And thank you so much for being here with us. It's going to be a little bit of an abbreviated class tonight because just time. We're getting a little started a little late tonight. This is our next class on, let's see, I guess it's number 5 in Financial Peace University. And again, for the disclaimer, this is Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. This is his material. We are covering some of it. This is material that we were able to acquire through previous lessons. So I'm going to be basing tonight's class off of Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. It won't be exactly as he teaches it, but hopefully we will still be able to glean enough information to where we can continue to learn and to grow. So we have covered a few topics. The first week, I know you were able to hear super saving common sense for your dollars and cents. Second week we covered relating with money. Nerds of Free Spirits Unite. We talked about how money and financial concerns can affect families and relationships, and how it can how it's a responsibility for us to teach our kids how to use money and how to deal with debt. The next week we talk about cash flow planning, the nuts and bolts about budgeting. We covered a few of the principles of why it's important to have a budget plan in place, why it's important for us to know what we are doing with our money every week. Then last week we talked about dumping debt, and we talked about we talked about the history of debt in America. We talked about credit cards and how they all come about, and the fact that so many Americans nowadays live under the debt of credit cards, and how it's replaced a belief in our society of a very biblical principle that we are slaves to our masters. If we owe money, we are enslaved to those we owe. And how quickly, within 75 years, the entire philosophy of our society changed from believing it's a sin to be in debt to you can't get anywhere without credit card debt. So there's been a changing in thought process. And we talked a little bit about how we need to correct our thought process, to go back to what is actually biblical, and that is alleviating that debt so that we can live in peace, and we can live with a hope and understanding that we can get ahead and that we can be prosperous without the need of being under a boatload of debt. So this week we're going to talk about credit card sharks and suits. And when we say sharks and suits, 9 times out of 10 we want to think about lawyers. And I've heard a joke where someone said that there was a lawyer, an architect, and an engineer who were fishing one day. They were doing some deep sea fishing, and the boat capsized, and within an hour there was several sharks in the water, and the engineer and the architect were eaten and mauled by the sharks. And even in the chunk of water, the lawyer kept treading water. About 2 hours later, when the Coast Guard arrives, he's still treading water. Sharks are circling, and somebody pulls him out and says, "Wow, it's amazing you didn't get eaten." He said, "It's professional courtesy." But today there's a different kind of shark that we're going to talk about, and that's these credit card sharks. And the truth is that, and like what we talked about last week, the credit bureaus and collection agencies, the credit card business companies, they have a philosophy of business that has worked out for them. They have miraculously marketed debt as something that is necessary in order for us to get ahead. As a matter of fact, the credit bureaus have even started to change the way that they see a viable a person to open lines of credit for home loans or business loans or car loans. They now look at how much debt does the person have. Have they created any debt in the last few years? And can we squeeze in a little bit more debt? As a matter of fact, if you have no debt on your credit report, they see you as not viable because you have no debt history. And they actually will turn you down unless you put a very sizable down payment, because they don't have any way to track how you make your payments. That's basically what they're saying. So they will tell you you need debt in order to get ahead, when in reality you don't. The truth is, like I said, if you come in and if you're a person that pays things with cash and you buy things with a plan, then you come in and say, this is how much I'm paying, and you walk out the door. Because no matter what business it is, cash is still king. Credit is a very, 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 very big deal in our society nowadays. Dave Ramsey in his book talks about, and I think we talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago, where we mentioned all of the credit card offers we get in the mail, right? And how we get a lot of them, and most likely, most of us just kind of automatically, we don't even open the envelopes anymore. We know what it is, we throw it away. The only reason why my wife even opens the envelope is to use the little sample card they give you for her art projects. She'll cut those up and use it to, for paint, as a paint knife or whatever, So that's the only reason why we would even bother opening these things up. But Dave Ramsey talks about a class that he brought that up, and he told the class, during the course of the Financial Peace University, I'd like you to just start collecting all of those mail-in offers for debt. And he said it was a class of approximately 12 people, 12 families. And at the end, the class as a whole was offered over $7.9 million in credit over the course of the 8 weeks of Financial Peace University. 12 families, $7.9 million in credit debt was offered. That's just astounding. That is mind-boggling. I'm watching Devin's eyes just kind of, whoa. And can you imagine how much potential debt is still out there, just sitting out there, that people are just willing to offer up? It's just crazy. Credit is a big deal. And we already talked about debt and the reasons why we should avoid it. Like your life depends on it, because it really does. I mean, think about it. How many people get into debt so much that they will work extra hours, a lot longer time. Their family suffers from it, their health suffers from it, the stress of everything. And debt becomes such a big factor in our lives that our lives really do depend on it. If we can minimize the amount of debt, you don't have that hanging over your head, you're good. You actually feel more comfortable. You go home, you relax, because you're not worried every second that you can't make the payments on something. But we're bombarded every single day, and the credit industry gives us millions of different opportunities to wreck our lives. They really do. They open every door possible to give you what you don't need and encourage you and trying to convince you that you do need debt, and they turn a profit. And I remember, and this is not Dave Ramsey's material, but I do remember hearing some time ago that the credit industry, the credit card companies and the debt collectors, they actually look at people who pay off their debts, they call them deadbeats. They are the ones that are called deadbeats because their accounts close so quickly, they get a minimal profit. There is more profit to be earned in someone who is making payments over the course of 20, 30 years than there is for someone who comes in and pays right up front and they're done. There's those fees and interest rates and all these other things that are tacked on that it has become a multi-billion-dollar industry for credit, just in the credit industry, just for people doling out credit. It has become an absolute factor, and they will sell you a lie as quickly as they can. Here's something that's very important for us to understand. Credit scores, there's a myth, okay, that there's a myth running wild out there that is setting up a lot of young adults for total failure. And we can guarantee that almost every one of us here heard this one before. And if you have, you can probably finish this statement. You need to take out a credit card or a card loan to build up your credit score. Right? If you said that, you took the prize right off. Because you understand, we live in a culture now where that's the myth. You need to build up your credit score. You need to build up your credit score. Well, here's the thing. Credit score is not a measure of anybody winning financially. It is 100% based on debt. Not the fact that you paid it off, but how much you owe. The credit or FICO score is simply an I love debt rating. The lower you are on it, the less likely you are to pay your debt. The higher you are on it, the more likely you are to pay your debt. That is literally how FICO is set up. That is literally how your credit score is set up. It is based on how likely are you to pay off your debts. Period. So the whole thing is geared and skewed towards how much debt do you have. Your credit score is based on debt. Here's a breakdown of how your FICO score is calculated. 35% is debt history, 30% is debt levels, 15% is duration of the debt, 10% is type of debt, and 10% is new debt. Interesting. The whole thing is based on debt. So, where does your income, your savings account, your retirement plan, your real estate, mutual funds, all of that factor in? Absolutely nowhere. They don't care. You can make $1 million a day, and they don't care because they're looking at how much debt is factored into that score. Interesting, isn't it? So your score really only reflects your desire to be in debt. How willing are you to be in debt, and how willing are you to pay that debt in the time frame they determine. It has nothing to do with how much you make or how much you have. So, Dave Ramsey writes he writes this little tidbit about being deceased. Thinking, well, if I borrow money, right, and I realized, he said, I realized that I have not borrowed money in more than 20 years. I wondered what that meant for my credit score. So I went online to pull it, and here's what he got back. Our apologies, an error has occurred. We regret that we were unable to fill your score power order request because your credit report does not currently contain enough information to meet the minimum score criteria to calculate a FICO score. In order for a FICO score to be calculated, a report must contain at least one account which has been opened for 6 months or more, at least one account which has been updated in the past 6 months, and no indication of being deceased. No indication of being deceased. Translation, in our debt-ridden, credit-addicted culture, you must be dead to not have a credit score. Interesting. And side note, working with people's credit all day, I do see people come across where they literally have nothing to report on their credit history. And they are generally looked at as unviable for a loan. Until that person turns around and says, well, I buy everything cash. And yes, I'm looking to buy a $120,000 18-wheeler, but I've got $40,000 to put down. Suddenly the tables turn. Now they're no longer not viable for this purchase because they have something to put down. And I find it interesting that it really does require, a lot of practices for a lot of places is you have to have a certain amount of debt in order for us to even consider you for additional debt. Kind of weird, isn't it? It just doesn't make sense. Credit bureaus have a tendency to get things mixed up. How many of you have ever had any problems with your credit history? If you've ever checked it, if you've ever looked it up, you ever just kind of gone to, you can go to all of the credit bureaus are required that if you request a copy, they are required by law to give you one at least every 3 months. If you ask for one, they can give you one every 3 months for free. You don't have to pay anything for it. And as a matter of fact, I remember some years ago that I checked my credit and I found things on it that were quite interesting. This is probably another reason why there will not be a John Smellick III, at least not while I'm alive. I was born in 1976, but on my credit history it showed that I bought a house in 1973 and that I had bought a car in 1981. And I'm thinking, okay, I wasn't even conceived yet in 73, and I was 5 years old in 1981. There was no way I bought a car. But it was my grandfather's house, John Peter Smellick. I'm John Andrew Smellick. So my grandfather's house was on my credit report. My dad's car was on my credit report. And then whatever misgivings and whatever issues my parents had ended up on my credit report. Because they didn't bother to look at my social security number or birth date. They looked at first and last name and shoved it in it. So it took months to clean it up. And it's a continuous process. And you know what? The credit bureaus really don't care to figure it out for themselves. You have to do it for yourself. Again, FICO score has nothing to do with wealth and success. So building the score is really not their interest. It's yours. It is our responsibility to look at it, to fix it. And there's a big difference between having bad credit history and having no credit history. If you honor your bills and you pay your bills and you do what you're supposed to do, you can have, and believe it or not, I have seen this also on credit reports, people can actually turn around and do what's called self-reported utilities. You pay your light bill on time, right? You pay your gas bill, you pay your water bill. You can actually request to have that placed on your credit history. Because that is something that's not, it's not a debt that you're asking out as like a credit line, but it's a service that you're actually paying month to month. And if you pay it on time every month, if you don't have any lates or penalties, then, it looks good, right? Wrong. Credit histories, most places will look at it as, okay, that's self-reported, they're just beefing up their credit. We want to see how much debt. Ironic, isn't it? We need to pay our bills, right? So we have to do that. So we don't want to wreck our FICO score either, because if you already have debt, if you already have, car loan, house loan, if you've already got credit cards out there, we're not saying stop paying it all together because FICO doesn't matter. That's not what we're saying. Again, there's a difference between bad credit history and no credit history. So what the whole idea of what we're going through and everything that we're learning in financial peace is so that we can clean out all that debt and go from credit history to no credit history. Okay? And I know it sounds kind of backwards, and you've heard me say already, a lot of places are going to look at, well, you're not viable, you don't have any debt. That makes you more viable because you're going to be able to actually come in and say, no, I don't have debt, but I've got cash. Because you're going to be someone who's been able to responsibly factor out your debt, save money to purchase what you need to purchase, the way our grandfathers used to. No debt. My grandfather has purchased 4 or 5 houses in his lifetime. No loan. So it's not that it's impossible. It's possible for us to do it. If they used to be able to do it then, we can do it now. Really, the only thing that has changed is the slide rule of how much the dollar value. That's it. Because, believe it or not, we say, okay, well, now $200,000 is a lot for a house. Well, yes, it is. But let's put it in comparison. Back in my great-grandfather's day, back before the Depression, what is now a $200,000 house would have cost $40,000 back then. $100 a month was a lot of money. It's equivalent to making $3,000, $4,000 a month now. So the inflation slide rule is the only thing that's changed. If we attack our debts, if we attack our finances the way our great-grandfathers did, we can operate the same way, regardless of how that slide rule moves, regardless of what the credit industry says is absolutely necessary for us to move forward and have success. So we need to start learning on how to clean up our mess. The account information on our credit report for 7 years states very, very vividly from the date of last activity. Okay, so we have, at this point, if you have credit card debt now, if you have car payments and house payments on that, then it's being reported from your last activity. Okay, so if you pay it all off right now, here today, it will stay on your bureau for a measure of time, up to 7 years before it drops off. So if you were to pay off all your debts right now, it won't be until 7 years later that you show up with no credit history. Interesting. Your debt stays with you for at least 7 years. But your success isn't measured on anybody's rating. Very interesting. But it's very important for us to now begin to look at how we deal with debt and how we've got to really start changing it and to clean up the mess. We've already talked about the fact that we don't need all these credit cards. We really don't. We need to start factoring in a way to save money on a basis. If there's little luxuries that we take too frequently, too often, how can we factor that out? Instead of taking those luxuries, like if you twice a day you stop at Starbucks, you spend $6, $7, $8 each time you roll in to get yourself a drink, maybe you can start rolling that back a little bit. I mean, it's a luxury, right? A cup of coffee is a cup of coffee. Oh, well, no one does it like Starbucks. Well, you know what? Actually, they sell their Starbucks coffee in the grocery aisle. You can put it in the Keurig. You get the same thing.
It's like not so much more about teacups.
Exactly. So,
how about McDonald's coffee?
So if we start doing this, we can start cleaning up the mess. Some people will say, okay, well, let's use a get out of free card, a get out of jail free card. Let's file that Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Well, here's the problem. Chapter 7 bankruptcy doesn't stay on for 7 years. It stays on for 10. Here's another problem. The moment you put a bankruptcy on that, you are not liable for any consideration for anything until that is gone. Because they automatically think, well, this is someone who's going to break up debt, turn around and tell the government, I have no way to pay this, and the government forgives all that debt, and everybody else who gave you that debt is now holding the bag with no money coming in. Not really a good practice. As a matter of fact, it's not a Christian practice either. Because in essence, you're stealing. So doing something like that would not be a good way to clean up the mess. As a matter of fact, it actually creates more of a mess for at least 10 years on your credit report. Right? Ignoring your credit report is not a good idea either. Because like I said, if you don't know what's on there, if you don't want to go back and check, you won't know that there are mistakes, that there are debts that don't belong to you. There are debts that sometimes make their way on there that have nothing to do with you. Sometimes a scam may have happened. Maybe you had your identity stolen, you don't even know it. You check that credit report and suddenly, whoa, wait, what is all of this? I don't have a credit card. I never got one in the mail. I never bought that car. I didn't buy a house. Why is this on my credit? So we need to take a more vigilant attitude about our credit score as well. Like I said, you can go to any of the credit bureaus and request a new credit report every 3 months. You may not necessarily have to do it that often. I can tell you, having had a small workshop on credit card identity theft and all of those kind of things, they tell you that you should pull your own credit at least twice a year, once every 6 months. Look at your credit, look it over. If everything makes sense and it's in order, you don't have to worry about it. But if you do it this way, every 6 months, you're going to be able to clock something that if someone steals your identity, you're going to be able to clock it fast enough to where you'll be able to legally do something about it. Which means you'll be able to contact these places, these creditors, and you'll be able to contact these things and clean up the mess. This is not me. I don't know who it is, but somebody stole my identity, and you can clean up the mess. It is important, and it is absolutely imperative for us to do these things. You cannot repair a bad credit report unless there are items on the report that are genuinely incorrect. The National Association of State Public Interest Research found that 79% of credit reports contain some kind of error. 79% contain some sort of mistake. 25% of them were serious enough to result in the denial of credit. About 30% of credit reports contained accounts that had been closed by the consumer, but still appeared as active on the report.
I mean, that was my sorry. Okay, we're going to start.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess. Yep.
Anybody else?
Yeah. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're not able to continue on with this, but I'm going to encourage you, every single one of us. Look, the credit card companies, the debt collectors, they want to work with you to get their money back, but they're going to try to dictate the terms. Here's a key. They don't dictate your family's priorities. You do. So you dictate the terms. If you can only pay a certain amount, stick to your guns. This is all I got. This is all I can give you. This is what you're going to get every month. I guarantee you, they may not like it, but they'll take it. They will take something over nothing every day of the week. But you need to find out what's out there. Get your credit report. Look it up. Check it right around. Look, go down the list. See what's on there. Determine, is this mine? Is this not mine? And begin the process of cleaning it up. If it is yours and you want to clear it off, call that company, talk to them and say, okay, how do I get out of this faster? And you can work on it. All right? Well, I thank you once again. God bless everybody. And